Hey folks, today we're taking a look at the newest expansion for King of Tokyo, and that's the Halloween expansion. Now, full disclosure, I should have reviewed this on Halloween, but I kind of dropped the ball, but too late, we just have to move forward and do it anyways. So, as the name suggests, this expansion adds a bunch of Halloween-themed stuff to King of Tokyo. You have two scary new characters with their evolution cards. You have a new set of orange dice, and you have new cards for the gear deck called costume cards, which sort of changed the game in some interesting ways. This is also Collector's Pack 1. I'm not entirely sure what the other Collector's Packs in this series will have. Probably the same quantities of the same type of stuff, but just thought it was worth mentioning. Also in this box is a little preview card, I should probably mention, for the next standalone big expansion to King of Tokyo called King of New York. But that doesn't really have anything to do with this expansion in particular, so let's go ahead and take a look at everything that comes in this box, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think about it. Okay, here's everything that comes in the King of Tokyo Halloween expansion. First off, you get two new characters in the form of Pumpkin Jack and Boogie Woogie, or Boogie Oogie, something like that. Boogie Woogie, that's it. And then, of course, they come with their typical character cards with victory points the same. In and of themselves, they are the same as all the other monsters from the base game of King of Tokyo. But if you are utilizing the Power Up expansion, you can make use of their evolution cards that come with them. Of course, you're going to have the Power Up expansion and to be using it, because just letting these two use their evolution cards and no one else would kind of break the game and not be a very good thing. So their evolution cards kind of work the same as the ones from the Power Up expansion for the other monsters, except that a couple of them have a new mechanic called the Gift Evolution. Now, what a Gift Evolution is that when you actually claim this evolution through the normal means of rolling and keeping 3 hearts, you can keep it face down until you deal damage to another monster. When you deal damage to another monster, you can choose to reveal and give them this gift, quote-unquote. So, for instance, for Boogie Woogie, one of his is I Live Under Your Bed. The monster who has this evolution rolls 1 less die. The monster who owns this evolution is immune to this effect. So, of course, you who are controlling Boogie Woogie own this evolution, but the person that you give it to suffers the effect. Worst Nightmare, the monster that has this evolution at the start of his turn must give the monster who owns this evolution 1 energy or take a damage. Pumpkin Jacks. Ignis Fatus, the monster who has this evolution gets 1 less reroll. The monster who owns this evolution is immune to the effect. And Detachable Head. Whenever the monster who owns this evolution deals damage, he deals 1 damage to the monster who has this evolution. But otherwise, they function just like normal evolution cards. The game comes with a bunch of new orange dice, which don't do anything else special. They're the same as the other dice, but they are engraved, and they look cool, and it gives you more dice if you're playing in big games, which is always helpful. Now, the big gimmick of this game are the costume cards. Now, these go into the gear deck, but as I'll mention in my outro, if you get a certain edition of the game, these are actually cut different than the other gear cards, which might make them difficult to shuffle and make them stick out like a sore thumb. But you have the optional variant of dealing one of these out to every player at the beginning, and you can either shuffle the rest into the deck or just not use the rest of them at all. Costume cards are purchased if you do shuffle them in, just like normal cards. However, and they're like keep cards. However, they have a couple of special things to them. First off, they all give you very, very powerful effects if you have them. But it is possible for you to lose a costume. If another monster attacks you and deals damage to you and deals at least 3 claws of damage to you, and that monster has enough energy on them to actually pay the cost, they can pay the cost and rip the costume off of you, and then they have it. And it can keep bouncing around from player to player. Now let's look at some of these, or all of them. The Vampire, at the end of any player's turn on which you deal damage, heal a damage. Astronaut, you win with 17 victory points instead of 20. The Cheerleader, you can choose to cheer for another monster when he attacks. If you do, he deals 1 extra damage. The Devil, if you deal any damage during your turn, deal an extra damage. The Robot, you can choose to lose energy instead of hearts. The Zombie, this is a very contentious one. You don't get eliminated if your hearts reach 0. Any further damage is ignored. If this costume is stolen from you when you have 0 hearts, you are eliminated as usual. The Witch, if anyone ends their roll with claws that are going to target you, then you may reroll any of their dice. Statue of Liberty, you have 1 extra reroll each turn. The Princess, gain a victory point at the start of your turn. The Ghost, at the end of any player's turn on which you suffer damage, heal a damage. The Clown, if you roll 1 of everything, you can choose the face for every die. And the Pirate, when you deal damage, steal an energy from each monster you damaged if they have any. So, that's basically in Halloween. It adds a lot of cool Halloween flavored things. Doesn't really change the game that much, but it is pretty neat. Okay, something I have to mention before we actually get down to the nuts and bolts of what I think about each part of this game is that components-wise, the costume cards in at least the initial printing of the game are cut differently than the gear cards of most of the other printings of the base game of King of Tokyo. What that means is that they're ever so slightly smaller than the other gear cards, which you wouldn't think would make a big difference. I'm not a stickler for that kind of stuff, but it actually makes it very, very difficult to shuffle them into the deck. And for that reason and other reasons, it's really better if you use the variant that's described in the little rule book for actually having each player start with a costume card. And even then, you might just want to go ahead and take the rest of them out of the game altogether rather than shuffle the rest of them into the deck. But that's up to you. I don't really want to let that influence my opinion of the game because Yellow has acknowledged the mistake and they're figuring out some way to take care of it, although they said it might take a couple months. I don't know why it would take a couple months, but nevertheless, maybe it's all resolved by the time you watch this video, and newer printings of the game will probably be correct. Now, the game itself, or the game expansion itself, first off, the characters. Well, the characters, much like with Power Up and getting the panda, don't really change the game. I mean, they're just new standees, essentially, that you have if you like that kind of flavor. I think they both look cool, especially Pumpkin Jack. The evolution cards, well, they do add a little new mechanic in with that, and that is the gift evolutions, which is essentially that you can give another player one of your evolution cards, and it usually does something very nasty to that player. The kind of frustrating thing while I was playing this game, I played this game, obviously I played King of Tokyo a million times, but I tried to play with the expansion several times, and each time that I did, the players, sometimes me, who wanted to play the 2 new Halloween characters, didn't want to ever take the gift evolutions when we had the chance because they're really not that great. I've always seen, no matter what monster you have, well, certain monsters are definitely all offense, 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 but my preference usually was to take more defensive cards, and really the gift cards, especially since they usually target only one specific monster, aren't really helping you get ahead in the game that much, if winning is all that important to you, which some people don't really care, but I care. So I always went for other evolutions. I don't think they're that big a deal. Whatever. That's just the way it is. The game comes with new dice. They're the same as the old dice, but it is really nice to have new dice, and they are the engraved dice. Some people might remember that the very first printing of King of Tokyo had just printed on dice. I don't know how you would say that. So that rubbed off very easily because you're rolling dice a million times in one game. And then you had to buy extra engraved dice. These are engraved right off the bat, so you're good to go. Although there's not any extra dice for special abilities or anything like that. So that's all well and good. If you just wanted the game for that, you're good to go. The costume cards, that's the thing that everyone really wanted the game for, I think. And they're fun. I like the artwork on them. The idea of them is pretty funny. Aside from the whole the cutting thing, I just think they're they make you a target in this game. And while that can be fun, I mean, this is King of Tokyo after all, it can kind of just change the entire focus of the game, especially depending on what costume you have. And that's kind of another issue, is that the costumes are not balanced at all. And this game is not about balance, but clearly the ones that you want are the ones that are going to make you a horrendous target, and people are just going to gang up on you. And then when you are able to rip that costume off of that player, you become the new target. We literally had a game where we did the variant where everyone starts with a costume in the beginning, which again, I do suggest you do that, because if you just randomly draw a costume from the deck and it's a really powerful one, it's just way, way unbalancing. At least having everyone start with a costume gives a little bit more balance to it. But someone in one of our games started with the zombie costume, We all ganged up on that player as best we could. It's not always easy in King of Tokyo to gang up on one single player. But then that person died. Someone ripped off the costume. The next person became the target, and the next person. And essentially it just went around to every single person at the table until the last person who was able to withstand all the other onslaughts was the winner with the costume. So it's fun. It's fun to a degree, but I don't know. I think that maybe there should have been more costumes, and maybe there will be. Maybe there'll be a Halloween expansion pack 2 next year or the year after that. But in the meantime, it's kind of... I have this feeling this is going to be how all the King of Tokyo expansions go, that they're completely inessential to your base enjoyment of the game. They add new little bits that may or may not be kind of finicky to what your group tastes are, and you're really just buying more flavorful thematic components for the game. And if you go into that expecting that, then you're going to be fine. But again, this is not something you need to run out and buy unless you just really are used to playing this with 6 or 7 players and having those dice. Actually, I guess you could play this game with up to 9 players now. The interesting thing is that there's no real game rules for playing with that many people, but I guess you could. I don't know that... I've never tried. I've tried it with 7, and it's kind of crazy and a little too long. But with 9 players, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe people have already been doing that with some of the promotional characters, but nevertheless, there's not a lot here that you need to have, but there's a lot here that could be fun to have. So I hope that helps you make up your mind. My name is Nick. This is Board Game Brawl. Reminding you to get out there and game every day and every way. Take care.